when we're impacted emotionally, when our stress response goes up, and it's not like in a comfortable place, it's in an uncomfortable place, our brain does this thing which is really interesting, which it usually moves to a personal attribution, which means like, what does this, it starts self-referencing. What does this have to do with me? What's wrong with me right now? Like, or how does this affect me right now? So the perception is about us. That's why we're not thinking about the kid. Like, oh, I wonder what's going on with them right now.
Hey there, and welcome to the Parenting Reframe. I'm Albiona Rakipi, mom, parenting coach, life coach, and someone who has spent over 20 years helping families navigate the wild, wonderful world of raising kids. But here's the thing. This podcast goes deeper. It's not just about parenting tips, it's about personal transformation, because parenting our kids also means learning how to parent ourselves. From fear to creativity, from disconnection to deep connection, this is where growth gets real. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Today, my guest is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. He's a psychologist, a mindfulness teacher, and an author who has spent more than 2 decades helping people navigate things like stress, anxiety, and emotional well-being. He is the author of several books, including Uncovering Happiness, but his newest book, Tiny Shifts, which explores how small, intentional changes can create meaningful transformation in our emotional lives, is why he's here today. Through his writing, teaching, and mindfulness work, Dr. Goldstein has helped thousands of people develop greater resilience, self-awareness, and inner calm. I'm so excited to talk to him today, and I know you guys are going to love this conversation about emotional regulation, because here's the thing that he outlines in his book. It's more about our emotional health than anything else, and the healthier we are emotionally speaking, we will live longer, happier, more fulfilled lives. I am here with the amazing and incredible Dr. Elisha Goldstein, who wrote a book called Tiny Shifts. And beyond just the book Tiny Shifts, his work is so impactful because he talks about one of my favorite categories, which is emotions and regulating our emotions, but he takes it 10 steps further. So before I go on and on, Dr. Elisha, welcome to the podcast. I'm really grateful to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here with you, Albiona. Thanks for putting this on for everyone.
Of course. I was just saying right before we started to record that, and we'll jump into sort of the methodologies and the things that you describe in the book, but I feel like there's this sweet spot of where your work really intersects beautifully with the work that parents are really hungry for right now, which is many of the parents I work with, one of the first questions they have for me is, how do I help my child regulate their emotions when I was never taught how to regulate mine? So I think when we can see it that way and we start to realize our part in the puzzle and like that we play this vital role, I'd love to just start there and ask you, like, one, thank you for your book and your work, and what brought you to it at this time? Because I think you do 2 things very beautifully in it. One is that you highlight just this importance of what it means to really process our emotions, and then to do so using quote unquote tiny shifts feels so manageable and doable. And then as a result, you hope to just have this, emotional longevity and this emotional health. So just to start, can you walk us through how you would describe emotionally regulated people, parents, kids? How do you sort of view that term?
It's the ability to have the emotional capacity in any moment, to be able to hold what's here, even if it's uncomfortable, and to be able to make decisions and actions that serve and support ourselves and our relationships. That's a quick way of describing emotional health. I remember, back in 2000, 25 years ago, when the internet was kind of booming and there was, a lot going on. I kind of felt like there was this overwhelm that was starting to come over people. There was like this fractured attention that began 2007. The iPhone came out and that like amplified that even more. And I think a few years ago, I started realizing that not only do we have this continuous fractured attention as parents too, but when I would talk to family and friends or just the people I work with, and I would ask them how they're doing, besides the common like fine, which is basically like, I don't want to share what I'm doing. I don't want to get into how I'm actually feeling. There would be this feeling of overwhelm that's here. And I kind of started to understand that was an umbrella experience people right now are having, because we have just an incredible amount of inputs. I mean, parents not only have to manage the schedules of themselves and their kids. And if they work and if they have a job, their job as well. They've also been programmed since 2007 to self-soothe through scrolling and different forms of technology. And then we get too much information coming in, and our nervous system just gets flooded and overwhelmed. So what we do, we fall into these kind of emotional loops. And I started to see this happening. And then if you look at all the feeds that are out there, it's like, you got this issue, go do this big thing. You got this issue, go tackle this other big project. And what I realized was, we don't need these huge overhauls in our lives to feel better, to manage our kids better, to have a better relationship in our relationships. We actually just need these, what I call these tiny shifts in the ordinary moments of our everyday life. I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road, these ordinary moments. So I wanted to help bring that conversation back and show people that it's simpler than we think to be able to interrupt our reactivity, our emotional reactivity, to be able to regulate our nervous system slightly, and to be able to make these kind of pivots in the directions in the way that's going to, again, serve ourselves and our relationships and the things we want to do.
Yeah, I really love that. I know we're going to talk about your 4 Rs because I think that is such a tremendous process for parents to be able to use. I have something similar that I created for myself years ago, and as a result have worked on it with other parents, but I call it PAR, and it just stands for pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. And the impetus of it was, I have 2 kids who are now older, they're young adults. And at the time, I really needed a way to shift out of reacting to whatever they were doing and then thoughtfully responding and connecting. And so I had to sort of, one, just pause and steady myself, and similar to what you describe in your process of acknowledging, just naming a little bit of what's going on, and then shifting into like, well, what's the most thoughtful response that would meet their needs at this moment while still either holding a boundary or working through whatever it was. And then that last R, reflect, came about later because I thought there's always a story we're telling ourselves about ourselves. So as I was reading your the book in Tiny Shifts, and you were talking about emotional loops, I loved how you broke it down. Before we even get to the methods, you kind of broke down even emotional loops that parents, not just necessarily parents, but anybody could get stuck in. And then you had specific ones like the procrastination loop, this loop. And I think the should loop was like, to me, to a T. I felt
it's a common one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, what is an emotional loop, and what are some of the specifics that you tend to see?
Well, first I'll start off by saying the goal in this work isn't to get to a point where you're never triggered as a parent. I mean, that's going to be something that's common for all of us and continue to be. The goal is here a little bit more about what you're talking about, is to be able to recognize this emotional loop, be able to redress the reactivity that's happening physically in your body so that you can refocus on what matters. So the emotional loop in any given moment, there's basically 4 things happening to us. Even in this moment, as we're sitting here, or as you're listening to this, there's 4 things happening in your experience. You're having certain thoughts. You're having an emotional response that's there. I always think of emotions as energy in motion. You can feel them. That's why they're called feelings. They typically are described by a single word. Anytime that you go beyond a single word for emotions, you're talking about a thought now. You're not talking about a feeling anymore. Like, I feel like I'm such an idiot, or I feel like I'm such a terrible parent. Those aren't feelings, those are thoughts, and we confuse them, and it makes it hard to work with when we confuse them. So thoughts, sad, frustrated, angry, afraid, enraged, anything like that. And then we're having a sensation in our body. This is our nervous system. This is all connected. We have this brain that winds down through our spine and through our arms and hands. That's what those nerves, that's what we call a nervous system. And our heart rate goes up, our muscles contract because we go into a fight, flight, freeze response, or we get really heavy because we're exhausted, anything like this. That's a sensation. So we just call that a sensation. And then we do something. We typically take an action. Sometimes it's just more thinking. Sometimes it's scrolling. Sometimes it's shouting and snapping at the people near us. Sometimes it's doing something healthy. We move into a state of exercise or do some kind of healthy self-soothing or whatever. Those 4 things are happening. They're called an emotional loop. And the reason it's important to name those 4 elements is because you want to have different ways of waking up to it. So like, for example, in your pause, acknowledge, your PAR, so here we say recognize. I use
Yeah.
the word recognize because it's a term that comes out of a variety of areas. So in a variety of in the world's wisdom traditions, they talk about recognizing certain feelings. In psychology, we talk about labeling, noticing, recognizing. In the field of neuroscience, we also see that recognizing how we're feeling an emotion or anything really brings more blood flow to the prefrontal region of the brain, which is involved with impulse control and emotion regulation. We just recognize, and that's sort of like that pause. And then we have to, in that moment, we could see the feeling, the sensation, but to bring in back the idea of the shoulds that you brought up, because I want to loop that in. I don't know. I know probably about you, Albiona, I'm guessing, and like me, like myself, and like everyone who's listening to this, a lot of us as parents, I have 3 boys, by the way, just to kind of name that, 17, 15, and 11 at this point. The 3 Boys Club, like we like to see if other people here have those. And so a lot of parents know what they should do, just like we think whether it's in our personal life too, exercise or eating right or whatever, we know what we should do. And so we got to put quotes around the should if you're listening to this and not watching. We should be patient with our kids. We should be calm, in the tougher moments. We should listen to them. We should validate what they're feeling. We should set appropriate boundaries, which is like my Achilles heel slightly, like growing up. My kid was in preschool and he would be crying and crying when I was leaving. My heart would just like jump out of my throat basically. And I would like find my way back into the preschool somehow. My wife would always say, you just have to leave. You just have to leave. So anyway, so I'm guilty of all this stuff. But anyway, so in that moment when your heart or is going there, your blood flow is going to the emotional center of your brain at the same time. It's it's kind of retreating from the prefrontal region. And when the child is melting down or pushing back or being disrespectful or that's when our nervous system takes over. And we think because we don't do what we should do, so that's what we call, I've fallen into this kind of should loop. We start to fall into another one, which is like a self-critical loop, or I'm the worst parent in the world loop, or what's wrong with me? I can't handle. Look at next door. These other parents are at my preschool or elementary school or junior high, high school. They got their kids with the right tutors. What's wrong with me? We fall into these things and then we become dysregulated. And you've heard on this podcast or other parenting podcasts, or you've read in parenting books, our kids learn from modeling, us modeling more than what we tell them. And then we realize we're not modeling it. So I think to your point, the importance of this type of work, of naming our loops, the control loop, the shame loop, the urgency loop, the comparison loop, is to be able to step outside of it so that now we give ourselves the ability to regulate. Now, and it's okay if we haven't been doing it perfectly. Again, we're not in this game to never be triggered, to do something perfectly. We're into it now. Now we have the tools to be able to interrupt these unhealthier loops. Now, this is where you start in an ordinary moment on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. so that we can now widen the space. We have the ability, and this takes practice and repetition, to widen the space, not just of awareness, but so we feel a little more spacious within ourselves. Now you have much more strength at this moment when you learn how to do that to be able to redirect in a way that's going to support you. You got a should loop, you got a self-critical loop, you got a comparison loop. Now what you're probably needing is, I'm guessing, an understanding that you're struggling in the moment. There's a suffering that's here of some kind. And you need to realize, and you can grab from the wisdom of this podcast or other things you've read on this, that you're not alone in this. Now you have access to maybe to that knowing to some degree. And you can incline now towards even asking yourself a different question, which can begin to redirect your brain to, can I even be kind to myself right now? Can I even be supportive to myself right now? Wow, my mind's been so mean to me. And what you find in doing this type of practice is your body starts relaxing a little bit. You start feeling a little bit more grounded. And that's when we use the phrase, the proof is in the eating of the pudding, where we say, okay, all right, I see this has an impact on me. And I just did it on a Wednesday at 4 p.m. when my kid was melting down. That's when we start to notice that stuff.
Yeah. I think that's so great. So recognize, and I love the word and I love all the things that you described in terms of, where it's really where how it all kind of came together. So can we walk through an example of how you would sort of walk somebody through how to use the 4 Rs? And I agree with you. I always say the same thing. It is a process and a practice. So for anybody listening, I feel like there's so much in, not just in parenting, but in the world we live in, where if we don't have a quick result that feels like the result we want, we just assume nothing works. Like I get parent after parent coming to me saying, nothing works. So we want to try this. And I'll say, well, it's not that maybe it didn't work. It's that we have to just practice it for long enough to just get some substantial data on like whether or not it worked. Like if we just try something one time, it's usually not going to present the results that we want. So how would you walk somebody through, let's say it's, I'm thinking of like examples that come up for me often. Our parents will say like when their child responds very rudely to something.
Well, let me just like share a personal story. So the 4 Rs are recognize, release, refocus, and reinforce. And so that's it. So I try and make it, the reason I made it 4 Rs in that way is because it's easy to remember. And when we're dysregulated in tough moments, it's hard to remember stuff because the part of our brain that's involved with memory is we're sort of far from it in the moment. So there was a time when my kids were, I only had 2 of my kids at this time, and we were on our way to the airport. You might have read this story in my book. It was an airport trip from SFO to LAX, so it wasn't very far. It was like a 45-minute flight. And as we were in the airport, my wife reminded me that we forgot to bring diapers. And so I said, don't worry, it's a short flight, no big deal. And so we get on the plane, and of course, about 10 minutes into the flight, I feel this very warm feeling on my pants. And I look down, and of course, my kid, as every parent knows this thing, had this blowout that was there. And so first of all, no parent would like that in any situation, but when you're trapped on a plane, it's like 1,000 times worse. And so there I had this blowout over my lap, and my kid was screaming and crying. And you're that person on the airplane now where everyone's looking at them. Everyone, you have this perception that everyone hates me, and I can't calm this child right now. And you get these kind of red eyes kind of staring at you. And so I quickly look because I figure I'll just go to the bathroom and kind of clean this up. They'll have like what I need in there, and then we'll deal with the rest later. And of course, there's this huge long line to the bathroom, and so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. And so, of course, I fall into a variety of loops in that moment. I fall into an overwhelm loop. I'm completely flooded. My heart rate is up. My body's super tense. My mind starts beating me up like I'm a terrible parent. Why didn't I listen to my wife? We could have paused and found this thing. And, what's wrong with me? All of this. And so in the moment, I didn't have the 4 Rs in that moment because this was a while ago, but I had this practice. The naming of the 4 Rs came together, really a couple of years ago, but this process was something I've been practicing for a while. And so I kind of recognized the feeling that was there, the emotional loop in that case was like this overwhelm, this overwhelm loop there, this shame loop that I had kind of fallen into as a parent. And by naming it, I was able to recognize also that my body was like coiled up in a ball and my heart rate was up. And so I took a moment to like lower my shoulders for a second. So we can change our thoughts by shifting our body. It's really fascinating. You can change it's called embodied cognition. So if you change the positioning of your body, or you change like the looseness of your muscles in a moment, you can literally shift the way your blood is flowing in your brain and the activity in your brain. So that's why we have this kind of release stage. Recognize, release. The release is just a quick movement towards shifting your body. Sometimes we can do it through just kind of shaking our body out a little bit. Sometimes we can do it just by recognizing where the tension is and beginning to kind of soften it or do a gentle stretch. Sometimes we can do it through a classic I don't know, 10 or 20 second. This is really not meant to take very long. 10 or 20 second breathing practice where we breathe in and do a slightly longer breath out, activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So the intention there is to just kind of release. Sometimes if there's a lot of thoughts, I imagine the thoughts coming out through my breath. And then I refocus by asking myself a different question. So this is the idea that when we ask our brain questions, it searches for answers. Just like artificial intelligence, you type something in and it pops back an answer. Our brain is always asking ourselves questions. So it's asking us, what's wrong with me? Like that question that was asking me. How can I handle this? What kind of terrible things are these people thinking of me? Who's judging me here? So if you ask it a different question, like, okay, so what is it that I need right now? You said you kind of reflect on that with the kids and with yourself. What is it that I'm actually needing right now? And I think I told myself in that moment when I asked that, and that's the common question that we can kind of tattoo on our brains. And if people here have heard that question before, because it's a classic self-compassion question, I want to remind you that repetition is the mother of mastery. So when you hear something again and it's something that's a supportive or good thing, rather than letting your brain say like, oh, I've heard that, where's the new information? Take it in again and allow it to be another way of watering the seed of something that really matters to you. So what do I need right now is classic. And so for me, I needed to be kind to myself. I needed calm. I needed ease. So I sat there with one hand, my kid in one hand, knew I wasn't going to the bathroom because there was a long line. I put my hand on my heart with my other hand, and I closed my eyes and I said, may I be kind to myself? May I find more ease? And then I thought of my child, may you find more ease? That would help me out a lot. May we both feel more calm. This, and not telling myself, it's not an affirmation, but it's a little bit of loving kindness towards myself. And what I found is my nervous system started easing a little bit. So emotions are biology. So it was literally shifting my physiology in that moment. By the time I kind of moved through that and opened my eyes, the line had kind of died down, and I was able to go and take care of my kid. And I even had this kind of thought that maybe someone here would kind of trade something for me for a diaper they might already have. I should ask people. Eventually, we did ask one of the flight attendants, and they found something for us. But that's how I moved through that difficult situation with that. So in a moment when a kid's being rude to you, and you're feeling really challenged by that, the first thing that you want to notice is what's the physical reaction? What's the emotional and physical reaction that's happening to you? So the emotional loop. So you're saying they should be kinder to me. I always think of my son when I drive him around the entire earth, it feels like at times, taking him from one friend's house to another, or one appointment to another, whatever it is. And I don't get a thank you. I'm like, I feel a little until I ultimately communicate that with him. But there's this recognition of your own reaction. You can only handle yourself in that moment. And by the way, I just want to name this to all the parents in general. When we're impacted emotionally, when our stress response goes up, and it's not in a comfortable place, it's in an uncomfortable place, our brain does this thing, which is really interesting. Which it usually moves to a personal attribution, which means what does this? It starts self-referencing. What does this have to do with me? What's wrong with me right now? Or how does this affect me right now? So the perception is about us. That's why we're not thinking about the kid. I wonder what's going on with them right now. I wonder why they're in this kind of rude place. We're not typically defaulting to that. You may be listening to this and say, well, I do. That's wonderful. That's a moment of celebrating that if that's the case for you. So take that in. That's great. But for a lot of people, they default to themselves. So if you want to be able to kind of shift that type of reaction, when we're feeling well, by the way, if we have a lot of positive emotions going on and our kid is rude to us, you may more likely default to, I wonder what, I'm a little concerned with him or her, because that's what typically happens. The attribution goes outside when we're feeling well. When we're not feeling well, it typically goes towards us. So we want to be able to kind of play with and switch that. So we recognize that feeling, that impact. Your body just got hit with that rudeness, you got kind of hit for a moment. So we recognize that. We recognize the contraction that's happening in our body. oh, I'm in the control loop. I'm in the shame loop. I'm in the I can't stand my kid loop. Like, have fun with it. And then we notice where you're holding that physically. You can exhale a little longer. You can lower your shoulders. There's no like complexity to this part of it, the release stage. I'm not going to give you anything really complicated. The whole point of this is it's something it's totally doable in the ordinary moments. So you might unclench your jaw. You might feel your feet on the ground for a second. It's really just to kind of like widen that space between stimulus and response. That's the whole thing. Keep it simple. It can be done in an ordinary moment. We recognize, we release, and then ask yourself like a different question in that moment. Like maybe you do want to ask yourself like, oh, what might be going on with my child right now for them to kind of react this way? Like, did they break up with their girlfriend? Did something happen at school? Like, or are we in this kind of conditioned have we been in this kind of conditioned pattern and haven't communicated about it, at all? What does my child need right now? You can ask a different question in that moment because now you've widened the space of awareness. You've widened your emotional capacity with a couple of very simple steps. And then if you notice that even if they continue to be rude, you ask a different question. You ask, hey, what do you, hey, are you okay right now? I don't want to talk to you. They slam the door in your face. I remember talking to Vanessa Kroll Bennett. They have another podcast called This Is So Awkward or Less Awkward. It's one of them. Anyway. And she was telling a story. This was while I was writing my book. I was interviewing them and she was telling this story about her kid or teenage kid who just kind of stopped saying, I love you. And she would say, I love you. And she would, they would stop saying, I love you. And they just didn't say it anymore. And she felt really taken aback. You imagine, your kid turns into a teenager. They start disconnecting a little bit. And she was really hurt by it. And she realized that she in a moment, like where the door was slammed in her face and it was just like, she realized this is, she kind of like recognized that feeling of being hurt. She was able to kind of like take some beats for a moment. And then she was able to ask a different question. Like, what can I do right now? Like, I so want to communicate. I so want him to say, I love you to me. I said, me. And she said, well, what I can do is, maybe this is a phase right now. What I can do is still just be here for him and love him. That's what I can do. So she took the control back in that moment. I thought that was really powerful. It's so powerful that I put it in the book as well as an example. But these are different ways that you can work with the loops that are there. Very practical, very simple, just takes repetition. And it can be able to make major changes in just the ordinary moments of your days.
Okay, so I really love this idea that you outline in the book. Well, there's two things. One is I love that you brought light to this because I think when I speak with so many parents and we talk about this idea of regulating ourselves, trying to find our center, trying to sort of be calm or steady for our kids, sometimes self-care comes into the conversation, and I think self-care is important. But can you help us reframe this? Because I think what self-care also does is just add more to our list. And I think you highlighted that really nicely in the book. You touched on it in a couple of points where it's like, okay, well, I have to work out too, and I have to do yoga, and I got to go meditate, and I have to, and it becomes this like longer list of to-dos rather than serving us. So how do you help a parent work through the yes, it's important, but also like, how do we meet ourselves where we're at and still weave these, really thoughtful practices in?
Well, first I want to say when I was, and I feel like Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, sometimes we just have to laugh at it because it really serves up things that make us feel like we need to add more to our to-do list. And this one always comes up for me when I saw this. I'm someone who kind of cares. In the last few years, one of the reasons I got into tiny shifts, because one of the underlying messages behind it is around the idea of an emotional longevity. The reason I use that word is because it's both about having emotional health for the long run. Like, how do we create more of lasting emotional health? That definition I kind of gave to you before. And then what does it have to do with our longevity? Like the
Mm-hmm.
ability, like in the longevity field, the idea of health span, about like not just living longer, but living better longer. And so what comes up my feet sometimes is like these physical exercise type things, because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the main things that comes out of the longevity field. Is it's really exercise, nutrition, and sleep. The idea of emotional health is like secondary, or sometimes just lump it under stress. And what comes up my feet are all these physical things sometimes. So there's one of the things that always comes up to me was this like older dad who was probably in his like early 70s, is my guess. And he was sitting there like doing like massive amounts of push-ups, and next to him was his son, and they were doing massive amounts of push-ups together. And when I looked at that, I was kind of like, wow, that's really cool. But it made me feel like, wow, I should be doing their plan. Like, what's their plan?
Mm-hmm.
Their massive exercise plan that they were trying to sell me, like in that moment at the same time. And it's just like another thing. And so this
Yeah.
idea of self-care, the idea behind this is like, of course, we want to make time to exercise, and we want to make time to plan, like eating well, and certainly sleeping well, and all of this kind of fits into that. But when you're feeling stuck in the moment or beating yourself up because you're not doing enough for your own self-care, let's say, well, what's actually happened in that moment, what's going on right there, is if you feel stressed because you're not doing enough self-care, let's say too stressed, well, then your heart rate is going up, your body's starting to
Yeah.
tense, and then you're starting to beat yourself up, which that kind of self-critical brain also is measured in the same areas of the brain as stress. So you're kind of piling stress upon stress. And when we feel overly stressed and flooded, we don't feel like doing a lot. We feel exhausted and tired. So you can see how this kind of like falls into a particular loop. So sometimes self-care is just in that moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
I'm doing dishes. I walk downstairs to my kitchen. I see it looks like a war zone in there because
Mm-hmm.
my kids haven't put away any of their stuff, or they haven't washed any of their stuff, or my son didn't empty the dishwasher like he said he'd empty the dishwasher. And so there it is, like more for me to do. Right. And so that's what I could feel angry, overwhelmed, frustrated, stressed in that moment. And one way of taking care of myself is being able to realize that I'm me. I'm struggling right
Mm-hmm.
then at 5:10 p.m. on a Thursday. And self-care would look like being aware of that, and or all these stories start happening in my mind about how they never do what they're supposed to do and how they never follow through. Like it won't look for the moments where they do. It'll kind of start kind of piling on. And to be able to interrupt that, because it's a cycle that's impacting me and my stress response in that moment, self-care would look like recognize, release, the self-care question. So I'll just talk about one thing for this right now.
Yeah.
When you get to the refocus stage of this method, recognize, release, refocus, you and I talked about how sometimes asking certain questions can lead to different answers. It's like we're taking the
Mm-hmm.
steering wheel of our brain, asking not what's wrong with them or how, but how can I support myself in this moment? What's something that can enhance my sense of ease and calm in the next 3 minutes? That's another question.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, and especially people who listen to this podcast, you know what you need in that moment. You already know what would be supportive for you. You're just having trouble accessing it. That's all.
Yeah.
You've read the parenting books, you've
Mm-hmm.
listened to the podcast, you've gone to therapy maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
And so you know what you need. The problem is that's not the issue. It's not more content, it's accessing it. So sometimes you don't have to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need to draw on your own wisdom because you have a lot of it. And so when you recognize release, sometimes you can just pull from what you know. And it's just that easy. It's just that you've enhanced your capacity to be able to pull from what you know. Sometimes, and the perfect with this, the name of this podcast, sometimes we just need to reframe the situation. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's what we need to do. So that's another thing that we can actually do. Sometimes we know that we need to change the channel. I'm way too activated. Nothing's going to work out right now. What I need to do is go outside and put my hands in the dirt, or start clipping leaves in my
Mm-hmm.
backyard, or whatever, something I know that's gonna feel healthy and soothing. I need to go outside and take my dogs for a walk, like that happened to me when I was when I realized in a moment that my whole Facebook had been taken over because I'd been
Yeah.
scammed. And I needed, after I recognized, released, refocused, I needed to change the channel and take what I call a joy detour, and just go outside and go
Mm.
take a walk. We know this stuff already. And so I just wanted to kind of know that and name that. It's not all about asking questions. Sometimes we just can grab for what we know. If we recognize, we release, we have more access to what we know. Um, and we can start moving in a different direction. And the last thing I'll say about this is the win for parents in these types of moments isn't calm and regulation.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the win. The win is that you noticed
Yeah.
there was a dysregulation. You were able to make a tiny shift. A tiny shift can just be like you're loosening your muscles. You're able to kind of do that, and you're able to come back to this space to kind of grab what you needed or grab what you knew was true for you. Like, that's the win. Whether you were calm or grounded or said the right thing to your kid, or that's not, I mean, that's another level of win. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But the real
Yeah.
win is that you were able to notice, you were able to shift, and you were able to come back.
Yeah, I really love that. And and I agree with you on the self-care. Sometimes self-care is just meeting ourselves in the moment. Sometimes self-care is pausing and not getting into a big reactive pattern where then you escalate and they continue to escalate. And all of a sudden it's, everything's canceled for the next year and I'm taking everything away and you're not going to, go on vacation. And then, you're not going to be able to do any of those things. But that's
Right.
those dysregulated states.
And by the way, we all fall into that sometimes.
Yes. Yes, we all definitely do. So I agree with you. It's like sometimes I even have one parent, I was talking to her and I said, just track moments of joy. Like, try to notice like the good things. Sometimes when we're so inundated with a challenge our child might be having or a pattern that we're trying to break through or work through, sometimes just noticing what they are doing really well. I was working with a parent and I said, she said, she's so mean to her younger brother and she's doing this. And she said, I get it, right? Like, we're so steeped in it and we're trying and we feel frustrated. And then I said, okay, tell me like the good stuff. Like, tell me about her personality. What does she love? If you said, hey, guess what? Today, take everything off the schedule. Guess what we're going to do? What would that be? And to your point, like, her whole body softened and her shoulders dropped. And she said, oh my gosh, well, she's hilarious. And she's actually so clever. And she's really good with friends. And she's one of these kids who will fight for the underdog. And all this stuff just started pouring out of her. And then she started to tear up. And she goes, I rarely describe her like this, or I rarely even have chances because I'm always focused on fixing what I believe is wrong. And so sometimes it's like, maybe not even pausing just in reactive moments, but even like to what your book outlines so beautifully is like those loops, those thought patterns that we just find ourselves on this hamster wheel all the time of like that subtle question of like, tell me just about her. And that's like where I usually start with parents is, I know where obviously you're coming to me because you need support, but I want to know the totality of who your child is, because if I don't know the good stuff, I can't help you connect. I can't help you bridge. I can't just hand you a menu of behavior strategies. Who needs that? Not your kid. So I always think it's an interesting thing when we can just even changing the question to your point, or shifting or asking the right question. And then also I wanted to highlight or pick up on what you said too, of like, we have the wisdom, we know, it's just widening that space so we can access it. And I always say it's like, and you probably know this being a father of 3 boys, so much of parenting is intuitive. Like, when I used to work as a speech and language pathologist, I mostly was doing evaluations and therapy plans and things like that. And a lot of times I would say to the parent, nobody knows your child better than you. Like, I can give you clinical expertise. I can offer different things of areas that, whatever, we're going to put quotes around expertise, but, I can support you there, but I'm not an expert on who your child is. You are. And so I needed both worlds to come together so we could really give this child the best chance at being able to sort of thrive and get through some of their challenges. So I love that, just the way you were describing that, of that wisdom. It is true. We all have that intuitive knowing sometimes of what our child needs. It's just quieting that noise long enough so we can access it.
Yeah. Right.
So thank you for reframing that for us too.
No. Oh, yeah. My wife did this really beautiful thing. That we were at my nephew's wedding. The wedding was supposed to begin like at noon, and it was like 12:20, and you could see people in the audience or the whatever crowd, whatever you call it at a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
were starting to get a little restless, and everyone was like looking at their watches, like that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, my wife's sister comes up to her and says, like, the bride is having some issues. Would you mind talking to her? We're both psychologists, and my wife has a really natural gift with being with people and working with people too. And she goes to her, and it turns out that the bride was having a lot of anxiety. What if this didn't work out? What if this didn't work out perfectly? Like, what if this, the wedding was a mess? And she helped her in that moment, like name what she was feeling. Like, and she said, the stress, the anxiety that was there. And she took her hand and said, let's take a moment and just kind of like do this breathing together for a moment, which was, the reason this is so magical to me is because, again, this is while I was writing the books. I hadn't like really talked to my wife about like what these kind of stages necessarily that I was kind of building in here. And she helped her grounding. And then she asked the question after she did that. So recognize, release, refocus. She asked her like, what's most important right now?
Mm-hmm.
So she had her brain. So to your point, the reason I was inspired, this story came up to me was you were talking about how parents get so focused on control and the problems that are there because we want everyone to be safe. Of course, we want our kids to do well. We want them to be safe. So we get stuck in our own loops around the focus around this, which are also important to pay attention to, by the way. But in that moment, she said, "What's most important to pay attention to right now?" And the bride at the time immediately named her husband. And she said, he's most important right now. And my like love for him and that, and our love together and like that's what's most important right now. And immediately her disposition changed in that moment. And very soon thereafter, she was able to get up and move. Right. So when my wife came, I said, well, how'd it go? And she told me like this whole thing. I'm like, oh my God, this is like exactly what I'm writing in my book. Can I use this story? She goes, but it's my story. I said, that's okay. I'll name you in it. Don't worry about it. Like, it's okay. So the same really works for parenting, in the middle of a messy morning where, the kids aren't waking up on time or, it's just like there's some kind of infighting going on between the siblings or whatever happens in my family. Or there's a struggle with like not doing their homework and they're on the games a little too long, or maybe there is like an emotional blow up that happens or with the kid or with yourself. We can do that. We can notice the loop that's happening. And we can just take a moment. It's really we want to really take in the simplicity of this. Like there was another book I was thinking about writing at some point, which was kind of like, life can be this simple. We want to sometimes allow things to be simple. What's the antidote to overwhelm? Simplicity. So allow life to be this simple a little bit. Give yourself permission in an ordinary moment. We recognize that I think should be different, or sometimes I call this the not wanting loop, or the wanting loop. Sorry, wanting things to be different than they are. And we recognize that. We take a moment to redress our bodies for a second. And that, by the way, feels good. So it's helpful. And then we ask the question, what's most important right now? That can really help create a shift. And usually the answer isn't control. It's typically connection, safety, respect, or maybe even helping the child feel seen or drawing a boundary. This is what really matters right now, to be able to access that in these difficult moments in real time. I like what you said. I'm just going to kind of name this. Takes kind of practice in the ordinary moments.
Yeah.
So if you do something like recognize, release, refocus on the good that's there, like you were talking about, you're kind of starting to train in the non-blow up moments. You're sort of training your brain to be able to do this type of stuff in the tougher moments. Another thing I say to parents is if you can predict difficult moments in your family, maybe it's around the dinner table, maybe it's between two siblings, maybe it's between you and a particular kid that's there because you're struggling with them. You could sit down, lie in your bed, be in the car, whatever you want to do, and you can kind of practice this. Visualize it for yourself. Visualize coming in contact with them. Visualize the emotion that comes up for you: frustration, irritation, stress. Just call. We can get more specific and in chapter 4 of my book, and recognize, I give a
Yeah.
whole huge emotional vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
so we can begin to recognize how we're feeling a little bit more. So we can name it, recognize, release. See yourself doing this. See yourself refocusing. What really matters right now? What comes up to you? What do I need right now? What does he or she need right now? See what comes up for you. See yourself acting from that place. And so what's happening now is you're giving yourself a memory. And when our brain works off memories, and so in those moments, and it's context dependent, typically memory, in the real time in that situation, you're more likely to automatically remember this type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And again, it's not that it turns out perfectly. It's that you're able to recognize it and be aware of it. You're able to kind of shift a little bit and you're able to come back. Again, that's the win. Over time, you might get better and better at, how you're communicating. There's a whole section in there on communication too. But that's sort of what we're after there.
Yeah, I really love that. I was thinking about even it's almost like you're priming your nervous system, or you're sort of preparing yourself so that when that moment happens, you're not all of a sudden in that reactive loop that you might initially find yourself in, but you're like, oh, well, I've practiced this a different way. I've asked myself those questions. It becomes much more familiar and more accessible. I was working with parents she was 8 or 9 at the time, and she had been invited to a sleepover. And that would have been her first sleepover with a very close family friend. So they knew who they were. And this particular child sometimes struggled in social dynamics. And the parents messaged me saying, she really wants to go. We really want to let her go, but we're just so afraid she's going to go and misbehave at someone else's house, and then we're going to feel embarrassed or bad, and then they might call us and say, come and get her. And so, right, they're playing out this scenario, and they're like, we just think we're going to just tell her we can't, we're busy, and we're just going to tell our daughter like she's not able to go. And so I messaged them back, and this was back and forth on Messenger, and I said, okay, let's sit with it for a second. I said, because what I really want to know is, are you saying no because it's just in alignment with your family values? You just don't, maybe you think she's too young, or maybe you just don't want her to go for a sleepover, or is she very excited to go? And assuming she could go and you knew for sure she was going to behave, would the answer be different? And they said, we would definitely let her go if we knew she could behave. So I said, one is, you don't want to eggshell parent, right? You don't want to walk around tiptoe around the moments that might be hard. She might actually get a lot out of this. And even if she doesn't, she's in a safe environment. She's not far from the house. The parents are good friends of yours. They can just pick up the phone and say, hey, she's struggling a little bit, and you guys are going to go down and get her. But let her have the experience. Let her try. And then I had them do some role-playing things with her before she went, in terms of like how we play with our friends, things that we would say yes to or no to, or, whatever the case might be. And anyways, it wound up going beautifully, and she went and she had a great time, and there were no problems whatsoever. But again, it's that same thing, like you're saying, I had them sort of walk through it like, okay, let's just assume 2 scenarios. One is it goes really well, and the other one is it doesn't, but there's still a solve for that. So let's really let our bodies be okay with this and not necessarily take that opportunity away from her. So I do think that practice of just framing and priming and thinking about it, like you said, even just taking that second of knowing what the trigger is and then addressing it that way. I want to get to where you talk about reinforce, because I think that's so important, and it speaks to what we've been saying, which is that it is a process and a practice. What are some ways, if you were talking somebody through this, I think when I was reading it, I was thinking of, and I don't know whose term this is, it's not mine, but I do use it, but it's something like experience stacking. And I used to use it with kids too, this idea of when you've done something, so let's say this little girl, she goes to a sleepover and has a really successful night and enjoys it and really loves it and all the things. Well, now she has this great experience, right? And so now the next time she's going to stack another good experience and whatnot. And now we start, kids are experiential learners. They're not going to learn through our lectures and explanations. If they could, it would be wonderful. But how would you kind of describe reinforce, and what should somebody be looking for in terms of what is that reinforcing pattern that we sort of want to cue or catch as we're in the process of using those 4 R's?
Yeah, the two R's that people miss the most with this kind of regulation idea is release and reinforce. Most people want to go from recognizing they're not feeling well to kind of just shifting the way they're paying attention, or shifting what they're doing, and it's not that sticky because it doesn't honor the nervous system being wound up, and we want more fertile soil to be able to plant things in. So that's the power of release. The reinforce most people miss this because once they do something, they're just so glad that it went better in some way that they're just kind of like move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Reinforce says like, we want to plant this in your memory.
Mm-hmm.
You want to remember this good thing. And so that, the next time this kind of thing comes up, it comes to you more naturally. That's like the idea of procedural memory. I want my brain to memorize this procedure. It worked. Like, what worked about this? So one of the things of reframe is it's kind of simple. We just want to see if we can be aware of what worked after it happened. So you can just tell yourself. So one of the things you can do is, there's multiple ways to do this. One of the ways you can do is just make it cognitive. You can just take a moment and just realize that, oh, look, I paused before reacting this time. That on its own is really a win. We want to take in all of the wins, right? I paused before reacting, or maybe, wow, I was able to kind of repair this a little faster this time. It didn't last days. I was able to go to my kid and we were able to kind of talk with each other about, or my partner, if you're in a partnership. I was able to talk to them a little bit sooner than I was before, even though I was afraid or feeling vulnerable. And so I was able to repair faster. That's wonderful. I lowered my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So just things like that. Just acknowledging it. So that's one way, just kind of cognitively acknowledging. If that's the level that you get to, fantastic. The other thing we can do is see if we can notice how the change in our body. If you go through this recognize, release, refocus, reinforce, and you notice your body feeling a bit more ease, or you feeling a little lighter as a result of the win that just happened, see if you can notice where you feel that in your body, and just kind of pause and breathe in and just sense that embodied sensation. Again, what we're doing is we're recording the embodied cognition of this moment and letting our body know that, hey, this was good. This was safe to do. And I want to remember this. I want my body to remember it at a deeper level than just my cognitive mind. Sometimes I like to play with the idea of, in our modern day, we love to remember things through pictures.
Mm-hmm.
We're very visual now, like probably more than ever. And so I'll close my mind after a moment that was a sweet moment. Like my son did say thank you. Or there was a moment of him saying, I love you, or something like that, right? Because I resonated with Vanessa's moment on that.
Yeah.
And I'll take a moment, I'll close my eyes, and I'll like take a snapshot, and I'll see the picture of this moment in my head. And I think, to me, that like enhances memory of it. And that's really what we're after. So the reinforce is about enhancing memory, both cognitive and embodied memory, so that our brain can remember it better the next time.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it is missed. I think people get through it and they're like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. And then they just move on, or there is some sort of quickly jumping into the next thing. And I agree that if you can I love even the embodied one. When I was reading about it too, it made me think of, like I'm one of these people who really resists working out, even though I know I'm supposed to and I should, and I do. And I have the time for it. And I've managed to find this great balance. I've done yoga forever, but I need to do different types of things. So a lot of times I will sit after a workout just for a minute, nothing too long. And I will just sit and let my body really feel how good it feels when I'm done. Like just that feeling of like exerting energy, feeling strong, feeling like my posture is a little bit better, feeling like I've moved things in my body in a way that serves me really well. And honestly, that's the thing that will motivate me the next time. So when I'm getting up and I might have a day where I'm like, oh, I just don't feel like it. I'm like, but I'm going to feel so good when it's done. Because I can really, like my body really registers that feeling and knows it. So I really appreciate it. Even you have so many in the book, even not even beyond reinforced, just so many somatic pieces where it's like how much our body is just really constantly involved, and we just disassociate, I think, from our bodies. I think especially as a woman, I can say.
Very true. And I'll just say the reason for that is there's an underlying signal that's being sent that you're not safe.
Yeah.
That this moment is not safe. So your body, of course, you're going to breathe a little more rapidly. Your body's going to be a little bit tense. It's going to be in like a threat detection, kind of state. And when you do like notice that, and you're able to just kind of somatically release like a little bit. You're also, I just want to kind of make this point to everyone, you're also sending safety signals to your brain. Because if your body's like softening, let's say, it says like, oh, your brain says like, oh, it's safe enough to relax my muscles. Oh, you're taking deeper breath. It's safe enough to take a deep breath. You're influencing it like in a reverse way that we typically think about influencing it. That's why when we're doing yoga or something like that, people get like kind of relaxed, aside from maybe the teacher's voice or whatever's coming across, is because when you're stretching your body like that, you're sending safety signals to your brain, unless your posture is incorrect, unless you're like doing it in a way that's going to harm you, like, you're stressing your body out beyond where it should go. We have to always pay attention when we're doing any physical exercise. For me, when it came to physical exercise, I knew that this really helped. This process really helped me because I was also someone very inconsistent with I was always physical enough, but when it came to like understanding the longevity space about like wanting to be there when my kids have kids and like be active with their grandkids, like that kind of vision idea, I realized I needed to get a little stronger. I needed my body to be stronger than it is. I see people who are older who don't look very strong, and I didn't want to be that. And so I knew for myself, when I kind of recognized, released, and refocused and asked myself, like, what do I really need to make this happen? I knew I needed someone. Now, of course, in some ways, I recognize there's a privileged element to being able to employ someone to be able to help, but I made it work in a group format. Someone can be a friend or a buddy that doesn't cost anything. But I knew for myself, I needed to meet somebody somewhere, and that's what was going to help with my commitment. I could fall into the loops, but I should be able to commit and do it on my own. Okay, maybe, but my history has shown me that I've been inconsistent with that strategy. And so then when I was able to employ someone, I became consistent for years with it. So I know that works for me. I know that works for a lot of people who feel like they can't do things consistently. And I tell them, like, if I'm doing therapy with someone, they're like, I can't do it consistently. I go, you've shown up with me every week for the past years. What's different? How come you can be consistent with me? It sounds like making a date with someone or having a time for where someone else is on the table actually works for you. Let's think about that strategy for this other thing for you. And again, it doesn't have to be paying somebody. It could be a buddy. It could be something like that. So I don't think robots in the future will be very good at that. Will be a very good replacement for that, because with the robot, you'll say, it doesn't really care whether I'm there or not. So I think you'll be like, there'll be an out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I don't think that's the future.
Exactly. No, I love that. And I think it is true. It's like finding the thing that's going to, using the 4 R's even in that process is so important. And I'm like you, it was like, I've always moved enough and I've always done enough, but it's like, as I, getting older, there's that part of me. It's like, I should, start to build muscle or just be a little stronger or, prevent injury. Like these are the conversations my husband and I are having, but it was really interesting when I read that. And like I said, the somatic work in the book is so great. Just that softening, that feeling in your body. Where is that tension living? Where do you feel it right now? I think for so many people, it's like, I can think of several people off the top of my head that I'm close to. I don't think they ever get out of fight or flight sometimes. They are just like wound constantly. And, it's something they're actively working on. And I know your book is going to find so many people, because it isn't just about parenting, obviously. It's, that's a piece of it. But I always say, if you can't regulate yourself first, there's just not much after that that's going to help, So I'll kind of end it with this, because I think this is an important piece and it's something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with others. But what would you say about sort of emotional resilience or emotional health of a parent? And what is the ripple effect of that for kids? So if you're a parent and you're listening, like, it's so easy as parents to go, well, tell me what I need to do for my kid, or what does my kid need, or what do I need to be doing so my kid does A, B, and C? And I think we just forget, like, we're such a part of that. So walk us through a little bit of like, what does it mean to just be emotionally resilient and healthy? And how does that serve our kids in a way so that they can develop those same skills?
Before I wrote this book, I was writing a book that was about the science of interconnection. And my agent at the time told me, interconnection doesn't sell. So I paused that book and but the message behind it is very important. I will get back to that book for sure, because it's a very, very important message. The power of emotional contagion, social contagion,
Yes.
these invisible influences that happen in our relationships. And, a dysregulated parent cannot, shame a child into being regulated. It's not going to ever really work. And so
Mhm.
for ourselves, and by the way, our kids are going to, it's the craziest thing, but they're going to come and go.
Yeah.
Meaning like they will be out of the house at some point. They may come back, but eventually they'll most likely be out again. So, and they go through their own. I guess now that I'm on the end of, and people who are listening to this may have kids who are in college and graduated college, or they may have kids who are little. Now that I'm on the end of the 17-year-old, I feel like I've seen these different waves of growing up with these kids, and I still have an 11-year-old. So, they're going through their own stuff that's transitioning. It has nothing to do with us at all.
Yeah.
And we take it really personally because we've had a whole history with them. So we have to be able to be the one who is taking care of ourselves and steady with ourselves, because once they go, or once they grow up to a certain extent, you're still going to be left with yourself to some degree. So we have to take care of ourselves. So it's the whole, I guess, just where did I just fly? I just flew somewhere. I was flying to Vermont. And of course I'm flying with my 11-year-old at the time, and the thing comes on about the airplane mask, putting yours on first. And we have to take that to heart. It's such a great metaphor for us. And if we can build our own regulation, and I will say this just to tie it to the field of health and longevity, you're in this for the long run with your kids. They leave the house, they are with someone, maybe they partner up, maybe they have kids. Like, you want to be in it for the long run. And your emotional reactivity does have an effect on your cells and on your heart and on your functioning in general. And so to be able to take care of your self-care is also taking care of your health, which is going to support you in being there for your kids for the long run as well. And so, I think that's what I'll leave with, because parenting is it's like a daily laboratory. It's really, it gives us the most opportunities for our emotional longevity. We can hold that space for it in that way. Not perfectly. We just do it one tiny shift at a time. Give ourselves permission to do it like that.
Yeah, I love that so much. So, well, I could talk to you forever. I appreciate you being on here. I'm going to link the book, and I know you do a lot of different retreats, it sounds like, or you gather these containers of people and you can just really get deep with the work. So tell people where they could find you or where they could connect with you after listening today.
Yeah, you just said, the tiny shifts is where all books are sold. And I always tell people, if they're going to a local bookstore and doesn't have it, just ask for it. They'll order it. That actually helps with the book getting into all these local bookstores too, if it's not already there. And, but ElishaGoldstein.com is really going to be a host for everything. I have an Instagram channel where I put up a lot of, reels and shorts that are supporting people on a daily basis too. That's Dr. Elisha Goldstein. And yeah, I think that'll be the places to find me. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Goldstein, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you we got to fight the good fight here and get people out of the overwhelm loops. And hopefully we all find ourselves and with a little more, being able to be a little more steady and inviting a little more ease in. So thank you for being here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening right now. And what really makes my day is if you share or recommend the podcast to a friend. It is the greatest compliment. If you have not already, head on over to theparentingreframe.com where you can subscribe to get my weekly newsletter, Parenting Skimmed. 10 sentences delivered to your inbox every Thursday to help you parent and live a better life. It's for the parent who constantly told me, I just don't have time to read. Make sure to come and say hi to me on Instagram at The Parenting Reframe. My DMs are always open and I love hearing from you. Until next time, this is Albiona.